Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In today's episode, we are going to discuss the Week 7 power rankings. As usual, I'm going to give you guys my bottom 5 teams, then I will give you my top 10 teams. We will also do a couple of dishonorable and honorable mentions as well. A lot to talk about, so let's not waste any time and let's jump right in. Alrighty guys, we are going to kick it off with my bottom 5 teams. So coming in at 5th from the bottom, 28th overall in my power rankings, I have the Denver Broncos. They are 2-5 on the year, and they are coming off a big win at home against the Green Bay Packers. Now with Denver, they have the worst defense in the league. However, when you look at their last 2 games against Green Bay, the week before at Kansas City, which is a very, very tough game, they're only averaging giving up 18 points per game defensively. Russell Wilson statistically doing pretty well on the year, although we know their offense absolutely has some issues. Denver possibly heading in slightly the right direction. I do think they're going to be sellers at the trade deadline, so let's see who's left after week 8. But I do like the Broncos. They got a big win against the Packers, and they played the Chiefs pretty tough, especially on the defensive side. Now, coming in at 4th from the bottom, 29th overall in my power rankings, I have the Green Bay Packers. So yes, the Broncos just beat the Packers. Sorry, Tom Grossi, Brandon Perna, congratulations. But the Packers just haven't looked good in a while. Jordan Love really regressing as the season's going on. Matt LaFleur, there's a lot of question marks about him, especially in the Twitter sphere. If you look at a guy like Kurt Benkert, who played under Matt LaFleur, he's been pretty critical of his play calling. The defense hasn't been bad, but it could be better. Overall, if I'm the Green Bay Packers, they need to run the ball a lot more with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. Don't put the ball necessarily on the shoulders of Jordan Love to get the win. Green Bay Packers, they've fallen quite a bit, losing to Denver, not a great look for Green Bay. Now coming in at 30th and 3rd from the bottom, I have the Tennessee Titans. They, like Green Bay, are 2-4 on the year, appearing to be sellers at the trade deadline. A lot of rumors swirling about Derrick Henry. Will he still be there? Maybe they trade DeAndre Hopkins, a number of other players perhaps. They just seem like a team who's really going nowhere. You almost think that, look, maybe should they just turn the ball over to Malik Willis or Will Levis? I think so. Ryan Tannehill, we know who he is. He's not going to get any better. He's maybe holding the team back. I think they should, for the rest of the year, basically see what they got in those young quarterbacks. If they don't believe in them, then you go with a young quarterback, and there's a lot of good quarterbacks projected to come out in the draft next year. But overall, the Titans not looking good this year. Now coming in at 2nd from the bottom, 31 overall in my rankings, we have the Arizona Cardinals. Now, for weeks and weeks on end, I've been saying the Cardinals, very feisty, they're keeping games competitive, and that's all well and good. But they've also lost 6 out of 7 games. They've lost a number of games in a row. They just keep losing. The bright side, Kyler Murray appears to be coming back maybe this week, maybe the week after. He is practicing, so that could be a boost to their offense, which certainly needs it. But overall, look, heading into the season, we knew Arizona are in a rebuild mode. They need to find out, does Jonathan Gannon like Kyler Murray moving forward? Do they need to draft a quarterback in next year's draft? They have some really good draft capital with Houston Texans first round pick as well. This is really maybe a bit like the Titans, just an exploratory year. See what they have, see who they like, who they want to keep, who they maybe want to trade away. Could they be sellers at the trade deadline, and go from there? It's a year that no one expected anything from the Cardinals, and now we're kind of seeing that come to life. And guys, at the very bottom, number 32 overall, this will be no shock to anyone. It's the Carolina Panthers. You haven't won a game yet. Until they win a game, they're not going to get out of the bottom of my power rankings. They need to do something, or at least show some serious signs of life against some quality teams. Bryce Young in a bad situation. Number 1 overall pick is going to be going up against CJ Stroud this week, number 2 overall pick. So that's going to be really interesting. Just seeing, the dichotomy between the two teams who we all thought were going to be in major rebuild mode. The Texans showing a lot more life. But back to the Panthers. They have a lot of work to do. Defensively, they have some players. The other players just not really performing at all. Offensively, they're kind of a mess. O-line not playing well, a lot of kind of older weapons not really being able to get open. Is Frank Reich could be fired, could be one and done in Carolina? A lot of questions to be answered there. Now, I do have a couple of dishonorable mentions for teams who very well could be back into the bottom 5 next week. We're going to kick it off with the New York Giants. They had a really impressive win over the Washington Commanders. Well, maybe not really impressive, but they did get a win. They now have their 2-5 on the year. Only gave up 7 points. Did the defense make a turn for the better, or is it just the Washington Commanders? Another team, the Chicago Bears, getting a nice win with Tyson Bagent. Wow, who would have thought he'd be out there winning football games this year? Chicago, we can't overlook the fact of how much they struggled early on, but it seems like offensively they're getting things going and the team is coming together. So that's good news for Bears fans. The other team, which also won big against the Buffalo Bills, we're talking the New England Patriots. They get a big win against a quality opponent. That's going to get them out of the bottom 5 for this week. But who knows, they could very well end up back there next week, depending on how they play in this weekend. So there you have it, guys. You have my bottom 5 teams, a couple of dishonorable mentions. Next up, we're going to do some honorable mentions just outside of the top 10, and then I will go ahead and give you my top 10 teams after week 7 in the NFL. Alrighty, folks, and as I mentioned, before we get into my top 10 teams, let me give you a couple of honorable mentions. First team just outside the top 10 is going to be the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns had a big win 2 weeks ago against the 49ers. They then came back and won against the Indianapolis Colts, and they were in my top 10 last week. So why, you may ask, are they outside of the top 10? Well, they hung on just ever so slightly against a maybe okay Colts team. Really could have argued they shouldn't have won that game. A couple of very intriguing calls made late in that game. But overall, Cleveland probably number 11 in my ranking, so they're very close to getting back into the top 10. The other honorable mention I want to say is the Atlanta Falcons. They're 4-3 on the year. Very close division. It's all within a couple of games of each other, with the exception of the Panthers. But I think Atlanta's playing really well. They could be a team who maybe makes a couple of moves at the trade deadline, trying to just secure themselves the NFC North, although there is a long way to go in this season. Now, let's move on to my top 10 teams. And at number 10, back into the top 10, we have the Seattle Seahawks. They're 4-2 on the season. They had a rough loss 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati, but they come back, they take care of business at home against the Arizona Cardinals, getting a pretty convincing win. The scoreline, maybe even a little bit closer than what the game told. I watched that game, I streamed that game, and honestly, it seemed like Seattle were basically in control of the whole game. They're looking good on offense, defense. Jamal Adams really starting to make some plays. They'll be getting DK Metcalf back, and I think Seattle is one of the best coached teams in the NFL. They have great home field advantage. The big key for them is going to come maybe in a month or so from now, when we start seeing them taking on the 49ers 2 times within the space of 3 weeks. That's going to be the true litmus test for the Seattle Seahawks. Now at number 9, we have the Dallas Cowboys. They're coming off a bye week. The week before that, they rebounded really well, getting a nice big win after losing big time to the 49ers. I think the Cowboys, I can't really drop them. I can't really push them up because of the bye week. I do think they're a very solid team. I think they just played really poorly against the 49ers. We've seen a number of teams have those just really underperforming games, and we're going to talk about some of those teams later. But overall, I still like the Cowboys to be in the playoffs. They should be probably the number 1 wildcard team, considering they're in the same division as Philadelphia. And Dallas, another team, could absolutely make some moves before the trade deadline. And that's really, I'm just going to say it now, that's really going to go for every team in the top 10. So I'm not really going to mention that point anymore. Now coming in at number 8, we have the Buffalo Bills. They are 4-3 on the season, and they've just come off a terrible loss to the New England Patriots. I know it's a division game, and I know they were on the road, Bill Belichick, all that stuff. But just wasn't it a week or two ago that the Patriots got shut out by the Saints and lost 30-something to 0? The Bills, you expect more from them. I know they've had a couple of guys get injured. Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano, 2 amazing players. But still, you got to be a lot better, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know what happened there. I saw a couple of highlights, but maybe I need to revisit that a little bit more. But a really bad loss for Buffalo is going to drop them down a whole bunch of spots in this week's rankings. Now coming in at number 7, another team who just had a really bad performance last week, and that's the Detroit Lions. Lions 5-2 on the year. They go into Baltimore and lose 38-6. They just got blown out of the water. It seemed like that game was over maybe midway through. By halftime, that game was absolutely over. The Lions just kind of gave up on it, and that's really disheartening for a team that was 5-1 going in there. Absolutely a chance to keep pace for a number one seed, and you lay an absolute egg like that. That is not good. A little bit concerning, especially for the offense, and that's really the strength of the Lions. They can score a lot of points. The defense is solid, not spectacular, but they can normally put up like 27, 30 points a game. Only putting up 6, that's not a good look for the Lions. And now coming in at number 6 in the power rankings, and it's the San Francisco 49ers. We are 5-2 on the season. First time they're outside of the top 5 rankings this year. And here's the thing. When I look at the 49ers, the defense did not play well at all against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, of course, people could say, well, they only gave up 22 points. It wasn't like the Lions who gave up 38 or anything like that. But they just were so bad on third downs. They couldn't get any pressure on Kirk Cousins, who's not a mobile quarterback, who doesn't have a great offensive line. The Niners just didn't look great. The run game was atrocious against the Vikings, and that's what we really do when we're on the offense. You get the run game going, you establish that, then you can hit teams with play action and a whole bunch of different crazy formations that Shanahan can dial up. But overall, a really bad performance. Brock Purdy now picks up a concussion. He's in the protocol. That maybe explains why his play just dropped off after his hit to the head. But overall, Niners, a tough game coming up this week against Cincinnati with possibly Sam Darnold starting at quarterback. Niners could be looking at 5-3. We have a bye week and then Jacksonville. So that's not a great look for the 49ers after such a promising start. Fingers crossed, of course, being a Niner fan, that we can get a big win this Sunday at Cincinnati and get back into the top 10 of the top 5 of the power rankings. And speaking of that, coming up next, my top 5 teams after week 7 in the NFL. And coming in at number 5, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, 5-2. They're just winning games. They had a really good 2 weeks away in London, and now they're suddenly, with a bit of space in front of them in the AFC South in a very mediocre division. Jacksonville could run away with that. Now they have some tough games coming up, including at home against the 49ers, but overall I just like the way they're playing. Christian Kirk is having a really good year. Calvin Ridley's doing his thing. The offense has really come together, and the defense is making more than enough plays to back up that offense. Kind of said I wouldn't go back there again, but absolutely, I don't see why the Jaguars wouldn't make some moves at the deadline. Why not? Maybe you add another player on the defense. Maybe you add another weapon on offense to pair with Ingram at tight end. Overall, I really like how the Jaguars are playing, and they are number 5 in my power rankings. And now coming in at number 4. This might be a bit controversial, but because they lost last week, but I have the Miami Dolphins. They're also 5-2 on the year. They lost by 2 touchdowns to the Philadelphia Eagles. Not a great look. Now, if you've been looking at Twitter at all, you're going to see there was a lot of potentially missed calls in that game, plus against a very, very good Philadelphia Eagles team. That's never an easy game for anyone, so I don't want to hold that too much against them. You'd like to see the Miami Dolphins bounce back a little bit next week. Offensively, they have the firepower. Devon Achane should be coming back shortly. Remember, maybe a month or so from now, they could very well be getting Jalen Ramsey to add to that defense. So I think Miami's going to be just fine. I think they should rebound, and right now they're number 4. But coming in at number 3 in the rankings and shooting way up this week are the Baltimore Ravens, 5-2 on the season, and they just had a monster win against the Detroit Lions. We mentioned earlier when talking about the Lions, 38-6. They have the best defense in the NFL. It was the Browns. The Browns just gave up 38 points to Gardner Minshew. So when you look at the points per game, Baltimore, the only team to give up less than 100 points on the season. They're playing great football. The offense getting things going. You look at, Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar. They have weapons. Mark Andrews at tight end. Lamar is playing good football. They just need a dynamic running back. Don't be surprised if they call the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry in a Baltimore Ravens uniform to add to that offense, that would be scary, and I think would absolutely make them legitimate, solid Super Bowl contenders. That's a move that, just as a football fan, I think I'd love to see anyways. So there you have it, Baltimore, number 3. And now at number 2, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are 6-1 on the year. After that loss week 1 to the Lions, they've just been on a roll. It hasn't always been pretty, though. You look at some of their games. You look at the game against the Broncos a couple weeks ago. It still feels like Mahomes is trying to figure things out without this true out-and-out number 1 receiver. We all know how well Travis Kelce is playing, and the weapons are starting to get there, but they just don't seem to be clicking and firing on all cylinders just yet. They still have time, and maybe they don't want to peak too early. They could be absolutely another team who tries to trade for maybe a wide receiver, someone who's selling. Like, I don't know if they would do it in division, but the Broncos, who knows? Maybe Kansas City has to overpay, but there are options out there for the Chiefs. They are number 2 in the power rankings. If they can get a big definitive win over a top 5 team, I'm absolutely willing to put Chiefs at number 1. But for right now, they are going to stay at number 2. And at number 1, and back way up to the top, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. 6-1 on the year, dominating the Miami Dolphins, who are a very, very good football team. Not only that, let's take into account too, they just traded for Kevin Byard, an all-pro safety, to add to that team. They are stacked. They are loaded. That's a team that I'm absolutely terrified of as a 49ers fan. They're the one team in the NFC where I'm like, wow, I just really don't know. I would absolutely say the Philadelphia Eagles, playing on neutral ground, that they would be favored over the 49ers. But overall, the Eagles, they're playing great. They've just added a huge weapon to their defense. The offense is now rolling. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, all these guys are making big plays. The one question earlier in the year was Jalen Hurts. He wasn't playing great, but overall, you have to he's kind of rebounding, getting a little bit better as the year goes on, and that's to be expected, and the defense is amazing. So the Philadelphia Eagles back at number 1 in my power rankings, and there you have it, guys. That's my power rankings after week 7 in the NFL. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about my rankings, if you would change anything, why you would change it, where you disagree. Feel free to post your own rankings. I'd love to see what you guys think in terms of top 5, top 10, whatever. Always love to hear feedback too. If you enjoy the content, do subscribe to the channel, like the video, feel free to share it on social media wherever you like. And just before I head out, guys, I'm going to say 2 things. The butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.